Hello and welcome to Space Shark Teaches. I'm Sean, owner and lead developer of Space Shark Studios, and in this series we're going to be teaching Godot. In this lesson, I'm going to teach you how to add more useful nodes than blank nodes like we did last time. So as normal, let's go ahead and open up our 2D platformer tutorial project. I deleted some of our old nodes. As you can see, the old 2D node is gone because we don't need it anymore. We're going to be making new ones, specifically the player and the floor. So to start, let's go ahead and try making a player. So instead of a node 2D like we've done before, we are actually going to be making a rigid body 2D. So as you can see, a rigid body is a body that is controlled by the 2D physics engine. This means we can add things like gravity. It can fall. That's what we're going for here because we're making a platformer. So we want them to stick to the ground. So we're going to go ahead and rename this to player. And I'll go over some of the stuff in the inspector real quick. So mode is rigid because we want a rigid body. We want it to be controlled by physics in the system. The other choices are static, which means it doesn't move, kinematic, which means it can be moved, but it is not controlled by gravity, and character, which we'll go over later. There's mass, so all objects have mass, weight, which controls the gravity, friction, which is how it interacts when it's sliding along surfaces, and bounce is what happens when it hits another surface. So if bounce is high, it will jump back at the same speed that it came in before. And there's a couple other things down here that are more advanced, not really necessary. So now we have a player. Yay! You can't see the player though. Let's go ahead and try and fix that. So we're going to add another node. As you can tell, this is how we add things to other things. And we're going to add a sprite. And a sprite is what draws everything here. As you can see, it doesn't show anything. That's because it's missing a texture. So we're going to drag that in there, and now we have a sprite. It's a bit big, so let's go ahead and try and scale that down. Move it around a bit. Oops. That getting closer. Close enough. Close enough for now. So let's pretend like that's centered over in there. Okay, no. All right, good enough. So now we have a sprite. Now we have a player. That's great. Let's see what happens when we hit play. Well, first off, it's going to say we've never defined a main scene. So the way that Godot works is it needs a main scene if you're going to be playing the game. So anytime you've ever played a game on your own, when you press play, it finds the first thing that needs to load. That's what we're going to be setting here. And since we have a main scene already, let's go ahead and just use that. There we go. All right, it has physics. It's falling. It doesn't do anything more than that, though, so let's make it a little bit more interesting. First off, let's make it look. There we go. And let's use the same process as before to make a floor. So we're going to add a child node to the main scene. We are going to make it a rigid body. Actually, let's make it a static body, because it's a static body for a 2D physics system. So like we said before, static bodies don't change. That sounds like what we want, right? Put that down below the player. Add a sprite. And let's say that this is the sprite that it's going to be using. Once again, we need to go ahead and scale it down. and center it as best as possible. There, perfect. So let's say we go and put it under here. When we press play, you would expect that the player should fall onto the ground, right? Well, let's see. Well, that didn't really work too well for ground, did it? But Godot is letting us know that there's something not quite right. So you can see these little arrows or error screens up here. So the node has no children shapes. It has no collision. So collision seems like it would be something that's pretty important for these physics objects. So let's see, if we type in collision, we can see under the 2D section, there's collision polygon and collision shape. We have very basic shapes here. So let's go ahead and use collision shape 2D. So now we have a little shape there, right? Well, we're still getting an error. So a shape must be provided for collision shape. All right. We can see in the inspector here that shape is set to null, which means it has no value. Clicking on the little arrow, you have a lot of different options. Usually if you're making a character, you'll set it to a capsule. We can set it to a rectangle, all sorts of things in between. Let's go ahead and say rectangle. And we can go and scale it up, scale it out, and now it covers our player. So now we have a collider for the player. The player has collision. We need to do the same for the static body, however. So go through the same process, collision shape 2D. Let's get down here so we can see it. Uh-oh. Oh, we moved the sprite out of the way. It wasn't hitting it anyway. All right, now that that's all lined up, let's go ahead and fix this. We're going to give it a rectangle. And once again, let's go ahead and scale this rectangle up so it actually shows what it's colliding with. And we can go ahead and stretch this out so that we have a nice, oh, I'm forgetting to do this. There we go. So something I probably should add, you want to go ahead and click this. This will lock all the pieces together so that you don't somehow move the parent instead of everything together. So now we can go ahead and move everything, the sprite, the collider, all of that, just like with this. All right, so now we have a collider on this physics object, a collider on this physics object. Let's see if it works. There we go. All right, your little player doesn't move yet, but this is what you need to be able to start your game. We now have a player that sits on collision, that has gravity. In the next lesson, we'll start working on a controller for the player so that they can move around left and right and jump. That's it for this lesson. Thank you for watching, and this has been Sean with Space Shark Teaches.